Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to day 11 of the COVID cast. Today is Tuesday, March 24th. I am Henry Hushke, a 17-year-old and student at Traverse City Central High School, coming to you from the northwest lower peninsula of Michigan. All right, so today we are going to. Today's going to be kind of a chill day. Not going to lie, doing the cast, I'm starting to get a little burned out or close to burned out. But there are some interesting topics today, no doubt. So today might be a shorter cast, but there's still plenty to talk about. So let's get into it. Okay, so on the virus front, so if we go to the Johns Hopkins tracker here, we see that right now, as a recording, we are at 417,582 cases, which is a massive, massive jump. I believe it's it's pretty similar to yesterday's total jump, which was a pretty big jump, although I think they may have messed up the way they did this. So I think the curve is still pretty exponential here. So yeah. So going into some of the places, bad news today out of Italy. We were really optimistic yesterday about Italy because they had seen a decrease in their new case numbers 2 days in a row and deaths. But today we saw it go back up to about 5,500 cases and about, let's see, I believe 700 deaths. So that just shows that even when the country's been, on this lockdown, it's not going to happen immediately. We're not going to see the magic immediately. It's going to take a few days of being around these levels, and then we'd hope it's going to drop off. So, it's not an instant, we're all done now, after being in total national lockdown for 2 weeks. It doesn't just end. There's still weeks to go managing the back end. So, speaking about the front end, going over to the U.S., where I'm at here. So, the U.S., as of recording, is at 53,660 cases and over 700 deaths. So really, really bad today. A very large portion, a little less than half of those cases are coming from the state of New York, who, as we've talked about, have done the most testing by far and have definitely been probably the most, I wouldn't say proactive, but certainly the most active in their response so far. But they certainly have had one of the biggest problems. So yeah, cases are up at a matter of about 10,000 a day in the U.S. Maybe even a little more than that once we get the West Coast numbers tonight here. So over 10,000 cases coming in every single day in the U.S. right now. And there's no reason why that shouldn't just continue to get bigger as we test more and more. Today, New York City kind of saw a similar increase, or New York State, saw a similar increase in cases, about 5,000 cases. But what I will say is that I believe we're going to see almost a fake slowing in the numbers. What I mean by that is our testing was so poor at the start that I believe that once the testing capacity catches up, there's a whole backlog of these cases that haven't been confirmed and found. So when those are found, it is going to, it drastically shoots up the amount of cases because all of a sudden they're found and they're registered as cases. But then once you actually are finished with that backlog, you're just left with the actual new growth. So it may look like once, you find that wave of cases that have already been there, the growth is slowing, but that might not be the case at all. So that's just something I'd like to say, that maybe this drop in new numbers could be kind of a misleading thing if it's not sustained over a long period of time, if it's just something that happens 1 day or 2 days. And definitely what we're looking to see here, just speaking about these new number of cases each day, is that's kind of referring to the second derivative. If you're in calculus, You'll know what I'm talking about. We want to see that inflection point occur where the second derivative turns negative, and we start to see, that graph bend downwards. So that's what we're going to be looking for. The U.S., if you watched yesterday's podcast, and it changes so frequently, I don't know what to think, but definitely the talk today, at least, was very focused on how we're going to get out of our quarantine and how we're going to get back to work and restart the economy, which, considering we're still so much on the upswing and on the front end, is slightly ludicrous. Although I don't think it's bad to think about kind of how we transition out of this. But what I would say about that is just manage your expectations. The U.S. has set a goal for Easter, being back to work, which, is kind of ridiculous. I mean, here's what I would say. I would look around to the rest of the world, what they're doing right now, and what's happening. I think Italy is a really good case study for how things are probably going to be in the U.S., what level of control we actually have in terms of the freedoms that we have here, and kind of the resources per capita. I really think the Italian model will be good to look at to see just how long this is going to take. So they've been in complete national lockdown for 2 weeks now, and they're just seeing the top of their curve flatten. It's like they're at the climax of their curve. So we can assume that they still probably have, at least, and this would be generous, another 2 weeks. So compare that to the U.S., and we're not even on a full national lockdown everywhere. It's kind of piecemeal between states. So it's almost kind of like if all of Europe was a country, right? Like New York State is like Italy. They're like furthest along in the progression, where somewhere like the UK is a state that maybe doesn't have as many right now, like Florida or California, but still has a lot of cases. So each state is practically operating like a country right now. So, it's going to be difficult. Let's see. Oh, and just here's what I'd say. If you want to look at what is likely to happen or what the time frame is likely to be, I would just say look at the Olympics. So the Olympics were supposed to start in late July, and now they're being pushed to 2021. So we're going to have the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. And Royal Caribbean has canceled all of its cruises through May. For us teens, the College Board has canceled the SAT in May completely, and they just have June right now preliminarily. So, we got to manage our expectations for how long this is going to take. It's going to be a long process, and we've really barely gotten to the point where we can actually focus on how to come out of this. So we should be focusing on how to come out of this, but we're not at the point where we should think it's happening anytime soon. That's how I would put it. And I think it's dangerous to have people manage their expectations that way. Right? If you've ever been to Disney World, a lot of the time at Disney World, they will post wait times outside the rides before you get in the queue. And a lot of times those posted times will be longer than the actual time the ride takes. That way you're happier when you are pleasantly surprised, right? For instance, if you showed up at, Peter Pan is a ride that's not good at all, but always has a way too long of a line. If you show up at Peter Pan and it says estimated wait time of 60 minutes, a rational person wouldn't go on that ride, but I'm sure kids want to go on that ride, whatever. So you might get in that line and be like, 60 minutes, it's not great, but you're expecting 60 minutes. When you get through it in 45, you're like, oh, hey, that's 15 minutes less than I was expecting. This is a good thing. And you remember the good thing about that wait. But if you go up to Peter Pan and it says 30-minute wait time, and you get in, and it takes an hour, you're like, oh my gosh, this has ruined my plans. This has ruined what I've set up, what I've been preparing for, and you walk away from that wait experience, or even 45 minutes, you walk away from that wait experience with a negative perception, despite things being exactly the same, really. So we got to manage our expectations. So we should be thinking on for how long this is going to last in terms of a few months, not a few weeks, would be just the smart and prudent way to think about things right now. Anyways, let's see. Let me just talk about, I guess, what do we really need to do to get ourselves through this? So there are two sides to this. One side is kind of this broad spectrum side, right? And broad spectrum is especially necessary, and social distancing is especially necessary with little testing, right? Because you're flying blind, you don't know who has the virus, it presents similarly to the flu, and people still come into work and go to school and stuff with the flu. So that's why we've had to take such a drastic national approach, and you can spread it asymptomatically. So because of those two things, we've had to take this approach where the only way really to stop it when you can't see where it is to shut everything down. And you see it even still spreads because people do have to still interact inevitably, to get basic essentials even. So that's kind of this top down is limiting the amount of social contacts that people have, so limiting the amount of chances the virus has to spread on a macro scale. That kind of blunt force thing has a huge effect, obviously. It's going to increase unemployment in this country. There's going to be tons of problems because of that. It disrupts people's lives. So what we have to do and what we have to make sure we're doing is we're not only, if we want to start to limit what we're doing on that top end, on that broad spectrum end, we have to start focusing from the bottom up. And the way to do that is with testing and contact tracing. So in a moment here, I'm going to talk about the local area and some contact tracing as a way of limiting the spread. Basically, what this is saying, and what usually happens with most outbreaks of anything at the start, is the experts will go in there and they will figure out who had contact with any infected people in the population when an outbreak is small. And most of the time, with most outbreaks, again, experts are able to catch it quickly enough that they can look at the 30 cases maybe that have presented themselves, and they can figure out the maybe 300 people those 30 people have interacted with, and they can isolate those people and prevent the outbreak from becoming widespread. Obviously, in the case of COVID-19, that did not occur. There was some oppression by the Chinese government at the start, which clearly allowed it to spread out. They obviously didn't realize just how contagious of a virus they were dealing with, and now we see what's happened since, obviously. Although credit to China, they have somewhat given some blueprint of maybe what it looks like in terms of limiting the cases and that sort of thing, even though they had to take incredibly draconian measures to do so. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is if we really want to get back to work and that sort of thing, our key is going to be testing and tracing of where the virus is. And this is an incredibly hard virus to do this with. And with 50,000 cases that we found and probably 150,000 cases total, 100,000 people that have it and, just haven't shown symptoms yet or haven't been tested yet, it's basically impossible to do that. So what we have to do is we have to take that top-down approach and we have to shrink the case numbers to the point where we can finish it off with those tracing measures. So that's what it's going to take. That's what we're going to have to do. But if we really want to get back as soon as possible, our real key is going to have to be this testing and tracing. And then with the broader social limitations and also the good hygiene too. That's another aspect I didn't talk about that's kind of up to the individuals and up to people, is to maintain good hygiene, clean surfaces that are frequently touched, that sort of thing. So that's how we're going to have to get out of this, and we can't be impulsive in changing our mind day to day. We have to have a very methodical, well thought out approach, and it's going to take time. So I would just say my message is manage your expectations right now and just be prepared for this to go on for some time. Now, just going to my neck of the woods here in Michigan. So Michigan is at 1,793 cases total. Obviously, not a good number. And I wrote down yesterday's new cases. Yesterday we had 293 new cases, and today we had 463. So I believe that's because partially that huge increase in new cases is because the virus is spreading more. Obviously, as it gets bigger, the exponential spread means that the number of new cases will be bigger. But also, I think our testing capacity has been slowly but surely being ramped up here. But two things of note. Traverse City, or Grand Traverse County, where I live, is now up to 3 cases. There were 2 new cases. And in part of this, I talked about this tracing so much as kind of being this bottom-up way that we kind of take out small outbreaks. Well, in Grand Traverse County, as far as we know right now, this is a small outbreak. So we can try to take it out in our local county, and this is for all of you that are here. With these 2 new cases, we do have information here from the Traverse City Ticker that, and I'll be posting these on the screen so you can pause the video and read them, but I'll read them to you right now anyways. So if you were at Target in Traverse City on Sunday, March 22nd, between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m., you should self-monitor for COVID-19 type symptoms. So I assume one of these cases was shopping in Target at that time, and they figured out. Also, any passengers, the health department has also already traced that one of the people today was a passenger on a flight from Detroit to Traverse City on Monday, March 16th, and it was the flight that landed at 6:53 p.m. on March 16th. So it's probably pretty likely that maybe they may have been asymptomatic. So that's what we have to hope for, that they weren't as contagious, but we can probably assume that somebody on that flight or somebody working in Cherry Capital Airport was exposed. So if you know anyone, or if you were either in Target at that time, or were at the airport at that time, or on that flight, you definitely want to watch out, and you should probably report yourself to the health authorities. Just let them know that you're monitoring, and you should go into isolation. You should have someone else, if you can, shop for you and get groceries and that sort of thing if you need to get them. Or if you have a nice stock of 2 weeks, just kind of go into isolation and wait. Or not even 2 weeks, I suppose. I mean, kind of 2 weeks. If you were in Target, you probably want to go for 2 weeks. But if you were on that flight or in that vicinity, it's almost a week later. So you would probably only have to isolate for a week. And if you haven't shown symptoms at that point, you're probably fine. But those are just some announcements for the local community, as we're trying to prevent a big outbreak here locally. So that is all I have for you today. It looks like actually this wasn't too short. I was able to blab for a little bit. Thank you so much for listening again. It's been really great to see the support I've been getting. Thank you all so much. And let's see, what is it? Is it Tuesday? It is Tuesday. All right, yes. And don't forget to keep physical distance, not be socially isolated. Continue to connect with others. If you want a list of things you can do, as I've just told you, to manage your expectations for months, if you want to look at some things you can do, you can go back to the very first day of the COVID cast for some things to do. I personally have got to up my reading. I know that much. So anyways, now that I've gone off on that tangent, let's just say keep social distancing. Again, try to stay at home as much as possible. Stay healthy, and have a terrific Tuesday.